Paris. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. So these talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hi, if you're watching us online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the head of studio here. I'm a white man in my 40s with long hair and a beard, wearing a chunky red woolen jumper today. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? I think it's all the regulars today. Well, welcome anyway. And just in case you didn't remember, what is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England and by generous donations from members of the public, just like yourselves. We offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunity, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. All right, just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. You're welcome to go to the kitchen back there, grab some tea or coffee or a glass of water. If you want to take a break at any point, we have a quiet space just to my left. That's your right, around the corner there. So if you want to pop in there, there's some sofas and bean bags, and it's reasonably well soundproofed, although apparently it wasn't when we were testing some speakers in here earlier in the week. We're not expecting a fire drill today. If you hear a fire alarm, it's probably real. The fire exits are at the other end of the studio. So again, my left, that's your right, down at that end at either side. But if you need them, one of the studio team will direct you to them. And then finally, there are accessible toilets and baby change over there in the corridor just next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of the talk. So if you're watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Lowatham is here. He will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and we'll send around a microphone so that the folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio or our new section of the website, watershed.co.uk/takepart, which lists all of the ways that you can get involved with stuff at Watershed that's a bit more interactive and involved than just watching a cinema screening. Or you can follow us on social media, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or just look up Pervasive Media Studio on LinkedIn, if you're that sort of person. All right, our speaker for today is Mark Osborne. Mark is a senior lecturer at Arts University Bournemouth and a PhD student at the University of Plymouth. His practice encompasses post-internet, physical computing, materiality of computation, hypermedia, liminality, and hybrid media form. Now, I have been asked what most of those words mean today, and hopefully Mark is going to explain some of them. Today, he's going to talk about Not Yet Invented, a series of workshops exploring computational media inspired by the 1970s utopian vision of personal dynamic media. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Mark.
Thank you. And thank you, Pervasive Media Studio, for having me. Yeah, so there's two bits, I guess, about this talk. One is I'm just about to do an Arts Council bid to do, hopefully, a bigger and better version of my workshop. So I'm looking to recruit people. And it's also a little bit about my practice, so you might decide whether you want to get involved or not. Right, okay, let's start. That's from my British Library Reader's Card. Me in about 2 years ago, right? Pervasive talk. So these are things that I'm going to talk about. A lot of them really not in very much depth at all, but I kind of go back all the way to the 1980s. So we have a little bit of some strands of the 1980s to start with, and then most of it will just kind of whoosh past a lot of stuff to get where we are now. Okay. So, yeah. Right, so this is a double-page spread from the fanzine Alternative Sounds, commentary fanzine. This is 1980, maybe 1981. So one, it's like alternative uses of media technology already, even though I was only 19 or 20. So the content of this is some kind of propaganda around the area of like cassette music, which is like even better than making records because it's even cheaper and more accessible. But one reason for showing this is like pre-computers. So this is all physical, so that is some letraset. So I've had to go somewhere, get some letraset, go back, make some artwork, probably go somewhere else to like a Xerox shop, get that Xeroxed. All the bits of this are all journeys to kind of make what this thing is, which helps you kind of appreciate when computers come along the things that they do. You know, even just having access to a typewriter is quite, not everyone has got a typewriter in 1980. And actually there's a credit for the typing which wasn't done by me. So we've got this kind of physicality, we've got alternative uses of media, and then we also got networking in that on the side there's a kind of blurb that got taken up by the cassette community. And suddenly I found I was getting cassettes from people in Europe, in France, in America, and particularly in Australia, a guy called Tom Ellard and Richard Fielding. There's some like amazing electronic music going on in Australia at the start of the 80s. So we've got this physicality, we've got alternative uses of technology, and we've got networks, even if they're powered by Jiffy bags rather than TCP IP. Okay, that's one strand of the start of me. And then just 4 years later, look, it's disappearing off the edge of the screen. That's 1984. I don't think we'll lose too much from this. This is the Roma Wine Bar in Coventry in November 1984. And if you don't know anything about these things, that is an 808 drum machine. That is a MC202 sequencer. These things are all connected up in like a little tiny network. There's on the edge of the screen there's a Pro One synthesizer. So this time you've got networks, but the network ends at the edge of the table. So it's bounded and kind of understandable. You can like make little diagrams in your notebooks to figure out how all these things work. So at the start of all of this journey for me, at the 80s, things are understandable because they're much cruder and simpler, which is not really the case now. And so the 808, one of the things that's interesting about the 808, well, one is there's another drum machine there, a digital drum machine, because when you had one at the time, you didn't think the 808 was the greatest drum machine in the world. You thought, oh my God, it's just this analog drum machine. I need to borrow this drumulator, which is that thing in the corner, to get digital drum sounds because they're much shinier and newer. But the key thing with me for the 808, which is computer controlled, I think that's what it says on the lid, is this is really the best experience of using a computer. You've got these little colorful switches, and you press one of those switches, and suddenly this big, huge noise comes out. So you get so much from one key press. Think how many keys you have to press on these stupid machines now to actually get anything a billionth as good. You don't. It's like downhill all the way from here. But key point I'm making in showing you this is this thing of, at the start, you're able to make small steps that you can visualize because it's bounded and in front of you. And devices like this thing here, which is to replace a drummer, it's a simulation of drumming, but it's kind of abstracted. And in a way, by failing to be a drummer, it actually becomes something really cool. So actually, digital things that can like be themselves, you can get some magic out of those. So you mentioned liminality. Why I mentioned that, I don't know. But there's a kind of liminal quality in that. Okay, let's keep going. So this is me. I'm starting to do electronic music. From that, you get things like MIDI and so on. And I was also trying to do computer graphics. So this is a teeny tiny picture because this was drawn on an IBM PC. Again, it's actually really quite hard at the time to get hold of a computer. Now you can't move for computers, but then actually getting access to a machine that you could draw on was quite a mission. So this is PC Paintbrush on an IBM PC. You've got 4 colors. You've got 320 pixels by 200, really sort of super low res. The tool, it's probably got about 5 functions on the bottom of the screen, whereas now you've got 5 or 6 apps from Creative Cloud that do 1 billion things. So again, it's a very kind of bounded tool. You can learn, even if you only got access to it every kind of Wednesday afternoon or wherever it was, you can learn everything that this tool does because it hardly does anything. But the things it does, they're all really kind of powerful fundamentals of working with computational media, so that you could grab bits of the picture, save them independent of the main picture. You could actually save and load pictures, so you can have pictures where you can make a mistake and you can load up the previous version of the image, which is amazing and awesome, and still is, but you just kind of, it gets lost amongst everything else. So this was one of 16 panels from a black and white comic strip that actually got published in Paul Gravette's Escape magazine. So you could kind of go dig out a PDF somewhere. There'll be a 16-panel version of this in black and white. One reason this is here is simply because it's a piece of work from that time that's survived. I've got lots and lots of files where they're just these grey files that you can't open up, whereas these are just a bunch of, I think, 6 or 7 GIF files, and they're still readable. Yeah, and again with this, it's kind of aping being a kind of drawing tool, but it's not fooling anyone that it's a piece of paper. I think it's more like just colouring the squares on a piece of graph paper. So again, it's creating its own space and its own aesthetic possibilities. Okay, so we've had pre-computing media, physical media, but still being able to network and connect. We've got initial kind of networks, and then we've got doing this. At the time, I realized, well, actually, it'd be cool if we could hook up all this MIDI stuff where we're making music and playing with samples with this kind of animation stuff, because you've got computers come along that you could animate, like Amigas. And what happened is I spent 2 years with a couple of mates trying to get a project to work that brought those things together. And we got some interest from a producer, Anne Wood, which just made that things got worse because we were trying to make 22.5-minute TV programs, and we couldn't have done an MTV ident with the kit that we got. So we just spent, well, me particularly, spent 2 years digging a hole in the ground, just making this project get more and more and more complicated. So at the time, you've still got a functioning welfare state, so you can do things like this and survive, but it also means you spend 2 years and have a meltdown because there's nothing to stop you doing this stuff. What happened with this project, though, is so we got all these characters. Every character's got a walk cycle. Every character's got a catchphrase. Every character, we've got millions and millions of assets for this thing. And I discovered this guy called Ted Nelson and hypertext and hypermedia. So out of the kind of disaster of this project, I got my head around what hypermedia was. And so when the 1990s come along, it's not quite this simple, but essentially I just walked into that because I kind of understood what it was. So from this complete disaster and meltdown, that's how my career in terms of working on the web, working online, started. So here's a bit where I'm kind of going to whoosh past. So, I spent from early 90s into the 2010s, 2015s, well, still a little bit, helping people online. So it's not simply making websites, it's like helping organizations become online in some form. So a lot of work with like tourism and heritage, and a lot of that is like transforming like kind of businesses that are at the kind of level of that fanzine into something that is an online entity. And a big part of that is getting your head around what actually people will accept and be able to understand and working at the pace that people can actually work at. So I'm mentoring people. Anyway, 30 years or whatever go by. So a lot of the things I'm doing are, at this time are with memory institutions or organizations that set up to do a HLF project or whatever, and helping them kind of do the nuts and bolts of the digital side of the project. So now we're going to look at a project that kind of transitions from sort of then to now, and may or may not just confuse things. So, all right, it's a project called This Is Then. There's a web address. And when I was involved with the fanzines, the major thing that I was doing was taking pictures of bands in Coventry. And this is not really just like naive taking pictures. Like there was magazines like Half Moon's Camera Works. There was like all the people that are working critically around photography, which were all really accessible, and that all fed into what I was doing. Anyway, 2010, I kind of rediscovered these folders full of negatives, and a friend was turning a barn into a studio and left one of these with me to look after. So they're not the greatest scanner in the world, but they can scan 35mm negs, not brilliantly, but they can scan them. So I had to play around with this, and a crop of this was the first picture that I had published in Alternative Sounds in 1979. So this I now know is April 1979. This is Coventry Carnival against racism. This is Hersal Common, and here just like a sea of mud, simpler times. People would have fun just being in a field full of mud. So when I first digitized these and like kind of started messing around with them, I don't have this kind of in-color memory of the 1970s are obviously all in black and white, because I didn't look at these and see the scene. I just saw these kind of 70s black and white pictures. Also, I saw them like big on a 24-inch screen. In fact, they're bigger than a 24-inch screen. So I can like see all of these faces of all of these people in these pictures. So I decided to do a project to kind of make sense of all of this stuff. It also helped that the specials had reformed at that time, and I got to license some pictures to them, so that kind of motivated me to do some more things. So I built this website, which is still there, and we're getting a bit of cropping on these pictures, but not enough to kind of screw things up. So that website's still out there, and still people are visiting it and commenting on the pictures, even though this was built between 2011 and 2014. And there's the fanzines. So the fanzines are in here because when you're doing arts council-y things, you have one idea of a project, and actually to do that bit, you have to add another bit and another bit. So this went from a project about the photographs to this kind of broader thing. I mean, one thing with the zines, it turned out that there were like literally hundreds of zines in Coventry. There were like 5 main fanzines, a fanzine that was just about all the other fanzines, and just lots and lots of other things going on that someone else luckily had documented all of that. So this project turned into something that was going to try and bring all of these things together. I was slightly like ambivalent about that. Along the way, I was also like, I turned the typeface for the project into a sculpture app, and the project got to where it was going to be an installation that brought together like oral testimonies, zines that be kind of moshed up somehow, and pictures. And I was trying to think how to make the pictures a bit more problematic than just simply showing them. So I didn't want you could disappear into the past. And that led me to the idea of working with dither. So if you can make out this image, you see there's a door there. This is this huge void space. The Coventry Evening Telegraph closed down, and this was their print room. So it's this ginormous void space, which unfortunately they've now knocked down. But I got asked by DJ Mark Cook if he could use my pictures of the fall because he was doing the celebration of Marky Smith after he died. And I said, sure. And then I thought, well, maybe I can play around with dither as a way of messing with these pictures. So this is 2018. I'm in this void space. I'm working down in Bournemouth, so I've driven up with a projector, and I'm projecting these pictures, and I'll show you in a minute, they're audio reactive. So it means as the audio changes, the dither changes. I didn't really know anything about dither at the time. I thought, you just change one pixel in the picture and the whole picture would fall apart. It turns out dither algorithms are actually brilliantly written to actually be really robust and not make that happen. But I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, this is awesome because I like doing this kind of performative live coding with some processing sketches, making these totally huge images, and it felt great, and I felt I want to do some more stuff like that. So this is a point where I went from doing this kind of archiving project to actually getting back into just some kinds of practice of just messing around with this computational media stuff. What I also discovered is actually people get really confused when pictures dance around with dither, and the pictures can work fine without dither or without the dither moving. In fact, you can use dither without pictures. So it's a point where things changed for me. Also at that time, weirdly, a bunch of people from Hull came to Coventry and run the City of Culture bid for Coventry. So through quite convoluted routes, it turned out that they then really wanted to use my pictures. In fact, they'd started to use them before I knew about it. So we ended up with a gig where I got a bunch of money off them to do a bunch of big prints of my images. So things that I'd just been doing on the website, I could do huge prints. Also at that time, obviously we had a global pandemic which kind of crimped the project, so it got kind of stretched over several years. Anyway, I did these huge, as big as our printer at work would do. Good thing with working in an art school is you have access to these really big printers, so you can print huge pictures out which you're really thinking about, is this practical or not? Anyway, so that's nearly 2 meters by 1.2 meters. Most pictures I didn't do at this kind of really coarse resolution, but it's actually really hard to get these kind of images to work on screen without just turning back into grayscale. That's, I think, a strength, not a weakness. It's a feature, not a bug. Anyway, so I did a whole series of these really big prints, and I did a series of exhibitions in Coventry. Yeah, see, when you hang them up and you take pictures on my little Sony camera, they just look like grayscale. In fact, they just look like postcards. Also, if you're doing really big pictures, don't put really big bulldog clips on them, because it just makes them look smaller than they are. So you want to find really the smallest things you can find to put on. But I didn't know that at the time. And also, don't time things so that you just take a picture when you've set up the show and then you collapse. You actually want to take the pictures when there's some people there. And so actually that is some people there. So that's DJ Mark Cook, who actually helped put the pictures up, but also asked me to do the fall thing. And that's one of my old art school teachers, Johnny Eden. And actually in 1979, while I was still at Foundation in Coventry, he did that banner. So this is just us being clever. It's a banner of a banner. Although the kind of message, sadly, is still extremely apt at this time. Okay, so this is where I kind of transitioned from doing a project that's me looking back for the first time ever, which was kind of weird, to that turning into more like my practice, which is messing with computational stuff. It felt really hard to make that break between the two halves of the project. I remember I took the thing to Flatpack in Birmingham, who do that film festival, and it just freaked them out that all these weird pictures, they didn't know who the people were anyway, and then they're moving around. Anyway, that's that project. Let's move on. Okay, so this is actually, in theory, what you came for. Not invented workshops. So 2015, I started teaching at Arts Uni Bournemouth. I teach on the graphic design course, the digital strand of that, and they paid for me a couple of years to go to Resonate, which some of you may have been to while it was still happening. And Resonate was this amazing festival, if you don't know about it, that happened in Belgrade, in Serbia. And they get all the kind of great and good of digital, computational, generative media, plus a lot of kind of great electronic music acts and rock and roll acts. And it was very non-hierarchical. So people would do a talk, and you could just go and talk to them afterwards. And we were talking there and thought, wouldn't it be great if we could do something like that over here? So that was the kind of thinking behind doing Not Invented, that we could do like a kind of imitation of Resonate. For me, it needs to be more than just let's do a workshop and make something. There needs to be like to dig and question a bit. So that's how we actually got this. So this is Alan Kay and Kay Goldberg. So they're working at Xerox PARC. Essentially, Alan Kay's team invented the computer as we kind of use it still now. So they invented this kind of multimodal graphic interface. It's not just about what color the icons are. It's actually these different kind of modes of thinking brought together, in that we've got a bitmap display, so we can display graphics, and we show like tools and files as these icons on the screen, and we can manipulate them because we've got this pointer device called a mouse, so we can like mess with them. We can have overlapping windows of stuff and content, so we can make best use of this kind of limited real estate of the screen. So they're bits that we've got on all of our computers still, but there's like a kind of fourth wheel to their kind of wagon. And it was like you could, if you've got an icon, it's like you could lift the lid on that icon and you could change the code. It's slightly simplifying things, but it was designed to be editable by the end users. So, and it's in this that they're thinking about this new kind of medium, a meta medium, whose content would be a wide range of already existing and not yet invented media. And so one is like, well, what's happened with this bit that's fallen off? It's like there's this sense that computation is sort of flexible, you know, in a way that, say, a railway system feels like fixed. But is that the case? Because we've lost this kind of capability from the tools that we use. I mean, there's capabilities there, but they're culturally moved to one side. Anyway, so that was a kind of starting point for this. And so the workshops, and this is just from some of the propaganda for the project. So a small team of creative practitioners deliver workshops, activities, talks with a group of student participants curious to know more. And that bit accidentally worked really well, in that we only had a really small window where we could do these workshops during our induction week, and we would recruit in the academic year beforehand. So the only students that came to this were students who were keen enough to rock up a week early. So it tended to be that we get really good students take part in these workshops. And this is a non-curricular kind of thing. It's open to students from across all the courses on the campus, although it tends to be just courses that actually I'm friends with. These are some of the people who've taken part in helping deliver these. This is, a lot of the people actually come from this building. So Ashley's done things here, Ashley James Brown, Becca Rose, who brought a really great kind of physical e-textile thing to the proceedings. Antonio Roberts, who I actually recruited in this very room whenever Becker's Feeling Machines was, and he did like workshops on Strudel and Hydra, which was really cool. And Pete Bennett is actually sitting here in this room. What a surprise. So they're amongst the people that helped deliver this. So we kind of get together and figure out what we're going to do. So it's intensive, hands-on, diving into noise, code, physical computing, critically informed by our own practices and broader themes via histories of computational media. That's kind of what we've managed to do. And it has kind of worked. And this is more propaganda of students who've all signed NDAs to let me use the pictures. And actually the guy delivering this, you might not know, that's a guy called Chris Courage, who did this. He then did an MA at Goldsmith, and he then started a PhD. In fact, he was online to finish his PhD before mine, but the kind of financial crunch in the education system meant he's kind of moved off to one side. But I like this picture because it looks like they've been like up all night working on writing some code for this workshop, which they probably had been doing. And there's some happy students. I don't know what they're doing to make them happy, but they are. So do my workshops, you get happy. This is from this year, well, it's 2025, and so that guy has got like a kind of pretend cactus on his head, and there's like a kind of prototype iPad with a picture. I've no idea what that is, but again, they're having a good time doing a prototyping session, making some kind of thing. We had a bunch of illustration students take part this year, and we had Nat Whitby, who I think has actually done things here. So she did a great strand on like prototyping and using those boards that she brought along. And this is like a kind of interactive animatronic tongue. And the big idea that this deals with is if you stretch the tongue, it makes a noise. So that was, I really like that, so I thought I'd put that in. Okay. Oh yeah, and along the way, one year to get the money, I had to promise that I would do a book and document this thing. And I was going to bring the book today, but it was too rainy, and I was worried it would get wet. So we did a book since about the workshop. So this is pre-COVID, and the book was inspired by Becker's stuff, all our kind of e-textile-y kind of sample books, and thermal printers. And the idea is it was going to be, I was going to silk screen it, double-sided silk screen, and then hand bound it all. Luckily, because previously in my life I'd done really stupid projects that failed, I knew in the end that this wouldn't work. And also COVID came along, so it meant I couldn't do it anyway. So then Ashley did this kind of proof of concept of what the board could be. And so one of the reasons Not Yet Invented happens, plug if you're listening, Dan, is that the Innovation Studio at Arts University of Bournemouth is incredibly supportive of what we do, and actually they paid for us to make a whole pile of these boards. You just send like a circuit diagram to a place in China, and 2 weeks later, a whole pile of these boards come back, and you stick some bits on it, and you've got a synthesizer, a really noisy one. Noisy in the best possible sense of the word. And we've done a whole series of workshops with those. People really like making things that are noisy. So this ended up inside a book. So the idea was the board and the parts were all going to get kind of combined together. I guess that's a bit like a kind of advent calendar. That's a picture. So the book is all designed in processing. So I made a kind of type and layout engine in processing. Again, this idea of like having something that's bounded and limited. So like you've got like really complicated tools you can do, page layout, but this can hardly do anything. So it's much more interesting to work with something you've made yourself. And this can do dithery pictures as well, which InDesign can't. So they're in design. And that's the book again. And the book comes in a slipcase, and the slipcase has got these spines, and inside the spines, all the bits to make the synth goes. It's not the most practical thing in the world, but we did make 100 of them. Unfortunately, it takes nearly half an hour to assemble all the bits. I've only built about 10 of them, but I've got all the bits for them at work, gathering dust. And it is a real book. I've got an international standard book number for it. Again, I haven't actually sent it to the British Library yet because I think they don't actually like art books. So it's kind of scared me to send it, but at some point I will, and the world will know it's a real book. And I can use my British Reader's Library card to actually go and look at it, maybe. Right, okay. As Not Invented has gone along, we've tried to kind of expand it. A few years ago, the uni paid me to go and do no school, and they do a lot more things than we do. One, they do it for longer. So that led us to kind of expand what we do. So in 2023, we did an Algorave night. It helped that Arts University Bournemouth bought a theatre called the Palace Court Theatre. It was a bit of a wreck at the time, but it was very good for kind of doing Algoraves in. So we had Antonio, we had Lucy Cheeseman, and we had Alex McLean. Like, so the cream of live coding did like a day of workshops and an evening of doing some Algorave stuff. So that was like totally cool. In 2025, there was not the same money available. In fact, there was kind of zero money available. So we got the Bournemouth EMOM people. I think you get EMOMs in Bristol, I would imagine that you do. So EMOM is Electronic Music Open Mic Night. And that, if you know anything about it, that is Martin Christie, who's actually an old mate of mine. In fact, if you remember at the very start of this talk, there was a double-page spread and there was the initials MKC. That was Martin Christie. He actually typed that thing on cassettes. All these things connect together. Anyways, it was great giving the Bournemouth EMOM people a kind of stage. We actually used a big stage of the theatre, and that was live streamed. Okay, so where next? So this is a scientific diagram of how Not Invented works. So those green blobs, they're days of the week. You see the letters above? They're the days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that's how this thing started off. Like I say, at no school, they do a day of workshops and they do a whole evening of like talks. So we started putting a talk on in the evening. At no school in France, they actually get a meal at the end of it. We, though, did beer and crisps, which in this country is probably the safest bet. So that was good in that it meant we got a mixture of the people who were delivering the workshops, plus crew, staff from Arts Uni Bournemouth who are into computation, doing kind of talks, and we kind of synthesized, you know, the different bits and pieces they were doing. So that worked really, that's been working really good. And then we started sticking things on a Saturday. So we had the Algorave and we had the EMOM. So what I'm hoping to do next is kind of expand that some more. One thing that I discovered as well is when you do this, like the amount of work you've got to do, that me has got to do, is like exponentially greater. So even just doing the ones that are just 5 days a week, I'm just kind of dead by the time we get to do this thing. So turn it into a festival just kind of kills me. So one reason to go and ask the Arts Council for some money is to actually make it a bit more sustainable. So hopefully at some point in the next few weeks, I'm going to do Arts Council bid. It'll be an expanded, not yet invented, with multiple strands of talks, workshop gigs, and other. That's always the best bit. If we go back, so movies, I've been working with a guy who's got, is an ex-Odeon engineer, so he's got a bunch of really cool Italian 35mm projectors. So we've got essentially a theatre to play with. So I want to get a strand of movies in this. Because actually, it turns out real movies don't really cost very much to rent, like say 150 quid. It's just that you've got to spend quite a bit more to actually hire the projectors. But at least I know someone has got some. So the idea is to do a much more kind of expanded version of this and to do it in a way that I can still think when it happens. That's my plan. And then, like me thinking, let's go on and look at a tiny bit of my PhD. right? So I'm doing a practice-based PhD at Plymouth. I didn't actually realize at the time that there at least were a preeminent place for kind of practice-based PhDs. Oh, that's the title of, I didn't write this title, by the way. The person that helped me get on board at Plymouth wrote it. So, liminal creative spaces, a practice-based exploration of computational media through audio-reactive, error diffusion, dither-based cybernetic performance systems. Let's break that down. Okay, audio-reactive, error diffusion, dither, right? So I'm going to try and escape from Keynote and show you some audio-reactive, error diffusion, dither. Let's see if this, and that, oh, there's the one I made earlier. So this is working. Actually, I'll probably have to close these sketches to get it to play ball. Hang on. Is that gonna? It is, right. So there's some dither. It's audio reactive. That's why it keeps changing. So that's the image. It's just some black and white grayscale swatches, but each one's kind of keyed to a different frequency band. And so as those image changes, the algorithm that's running across the page changes the dither. And one, we don't have to think about it at all. I don't care. We can just say, oh yeah, that's cool, or it's not. But one of the things that is nice is always on the kind of, it's like something's emerging, but it doesn't actually emerge, or maybe it does. The other thing is this is a completely deterministic system. It's just that what's happening is like non-obvious. Like, so a typical like audio reactive thing is we have a circle, and when we get a beat, the circle goes big, and when we don't, it goes small, or the light goes bright and it goes quiet. So this is the same thing, except it's just non-obvious what it's doing, right? Let's just seamlessly go back to the presentation and continue as though nothing happened, right? And then I've got this cybernetic performance systems. So in kind of a post-punk demystifying way, let's just try and make sense of that. Okay, so this is a cybernetic performance system, and there's me on the right, and I'm working that dither sketch on a computer, and it's being projected on that screen. And on the left, there's Alec Mills, who's a kind of synthesis from commentary, and he's got a modular synthesizer. So there's some kind of control values going from the dither sketch into the modular synthesizer. So obviously that's changing something in the modular synthesizer. So the sound coming out of the speakers changes, so then the dither changes. So we've got this kind of feedback system, except it's not a kind of functional dither system. Maybe it's a liminal one. I don't know. Anyway, we just let this run for several hours and see what happens. At no school, I got to do this. Amazingly, at no school, someone turned up with an electron digitone, which I'd been prototyping with, so I could get this to run. That's a color version of the sketch, because it's my dither algorithm, so if I want it to go into 3D, it'll go into 3D. Oh yeah, so let's have a little bit more of the PhD. So this is a kind of key thing for me. So I don't know if you know Rosa Menkman. She kind of works with glitch and image formats. And so she's saying, to engage with digital culture means to be able to formulate a critical point of view which involves analysis and active change through critical thought processes such as speculation. Uncovering and studying these spaces of speculation is of vital importance, and it is here where we find a growing need for players such as artists, theorists, designers, and many others who continue to engage critically with contemporary cultures. So a couple of things to pick out from that is we're obviously in one of the spaces of speculation right here in this building. It's a pretty awesome one. For me, this is important because I was trying to tie, why aren't we doing so much of this stuff at Arts University Bournemouth? Why am I just doing it in these workshops? So this is like validating what I'm doing so that they'd like do an MA in computational, playing with computers. So the PhD, after that complex and possibly to be retired title is looking for creatively centered understandings of computational media. So that'd be kind of plural. And we're just going to look at the kind of edges of the PhD here before I kind of get to the end. So this is from quite a while ago that I did at Arts Uni Bournemouth, thinking what do students need to know about digital or computational media. And so you might think of this like a kind of stick map of like different kind of routes through whatever this computational stuff is. So one is to be able to question what it's made of, and whether that's on the scale of we've covered the whole planet in this kind of big complicated network, or whether there's this kind of material, and when I shine a light on it, its resistance changes, and I can use that to make a component in a computational media system. So where is it from? So it's history. So that's why we're looking at Alan Kay and Kay Goldberg, because we want to see where things come from, so we can ask questions about them. And then possibly most importantly for me, like why is it here? And the role of kind of intent and intention, so that we're not taking like a technological deterministic view of these things, but we're seeing how actually people are making the decisions as to what these technologies are and can be and will do. And that's where my kind of PhD has kind of moved on from. And there's another picture of me in France, and I think we're nearly at the end. Yeah, we are. There we go. Thank you. And any questions?
Any questions from the audience?
Oh, not too bad.
Or Mark? Go on then.
Just wondering if you thought about opening up the workshops, not yet invented, to the public as well, or beyond students?
So if we're doing an ACE bid, then it will all those things will need to be public facing. So we'll use that theatre as a possible venue for that.
Great.
Anybody else?
What sort of students do you get to the workshops? What's their backgrounds? Are they fine artists? Are they computer buffs?
It's a mixture. So it's Arts Uni Bournemouth is a specialist arts uni. It's just all art subjects. You go in the library, they're all art books. So we get students of graphic design, we get students of fine art, we get students of illustration, we get students from costume. So we get a broad range of students from a whole series of courses.
Okay.
So, and it tends to be students who are kind of at the top end of their courses, who are making informed strategic decisions about it.
Right.
Anybody else? A question? Oh, yeah.
You mentioned spaces of speculation and Menkman's work. Are there any other thinkers and people you'd suggest for us to consider who might be working on this kind of computational media, the whole field of computational change?
Well, for me, Rosa Menkman is like an easy win because she's really kind of digging into it all. Another guy that I like is Alan Warburton. He's a more kind of video-y kind of space. I like Daniel Temkin, who actually works with dither as well, although his doesn't move. Although he can do triangular dither, which obviously I can't. He's like a really smart programmer. Really, anyone who's like digging critically into it. But I'm more interested in people who are like practitioners than people who are just theorists.
Anybody else? I wanted to ask a little bit about, so you talked a bit about sort of your own practice as it came out of this work in the 80s, and then through to like, well, the more recent stuff you talked about was much more in an educational context. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you could talk about like how you see the relationship between what you were teaching and then your own artistic practice.
So it depends. So some of the stuff I'm teaching, it doesn't connect that much, but actually the course I teach on it is a very like conceptual, ideas-based take on graphic design. So I think it's important to get students to think about the kind of media and tools that they work in. So I always try and find a way to fit that in. So like next week, I start teaching my lot how to, they'll build a website. So I'll get them to like hand code it. I'll introduce them to Ted Nelson. I'll show them the first website on CERN. So there's a kind of critical kind of context to what they do. It's not just playing with InDesign.
Any last questions from the audience? If there isn't, then I think we will say thank you again to Mark.
Cool. Thank you. Right. Cool.
All right. So before you all go, if you want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team and we'll be happy to help. Studio team, give us a wave. There's a few other people around. It's not just the two of us. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. If you like what you've seen here today and you want to help us to keep bringing you great talks like this one, please do visit watershed.co.uk/donate. Watershed is a charity. We really do rely on the generosity of our supporters to continue our work. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.
Lovely.